Welcome, everyone, to this meeting of SABR's East Coast Cooperative, a group of 7 chapters in Eastern Canada and the United States who are working together to bring you more great presentations. I'm Bruce McClure, chair of the Clyde Sukeforth chapter in Maine and New Hampshire, and tonight we have another great speaker for you. Like so many baseball fans and scholars, we have all been absorbed with baseball's integration drama. The focus, understandably, has been the heroic roles of Jackie Robinson and Branch Rickey, perhaps too exclusively. This presentation will discuss 3 settings other than Montreal where Black players signed by the Dodgers played in 1946 outside the spotlight in which Robinson shone. These locales and ballparks will be illustrated by PowerPoint images from photos taken from our presenters' visits to those parks, which still stand today. As an assistant professor of American Studies, Dr. Karl Lindholm's interests include the literature of baseball, the Negro Leagues in particular, Vietnam War literature, the regional culture of Northern New England, and cross-cultural literature. He earned his BA in English from Middlebury College and holds a PhD in American Studies from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. He served in student affairs as Dean of Students, Dean of Advising, and so much more. His memoir of his more than 40 years at Middlebury is titled Also Plays, Stories from a Middlebury Life, and he is here tonight to give his Malloy Conference presentation. Karl Lindholm, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much, Bruce. I always hate it when somebody say, we have a great presentation tonight, because I think as a New Englander, as a Yankee, I'm always trying to depress expectations so that people will leave and say, well, that wasn't that bad. You know, he's not so bad. And I'll mention just the reason I wrote these, it's about 120 stories about my time at Middlebury in student affairs and in the classroom. And it's called Also Plays because when I was a student at Middlebury playing basketball, we received from a friend at Trinity College the scouting report of our team at Middlebury. And it went through various things like, how you run your out of bounds plays and what the characteristics of the players were, and listing the players. And when they came to my name, they said, Karl Lindholm also plays. And that was the extent of the scouting report. So I feel like that's been my role. I've been at Middlebury worked there for 35 years, taught high school for 8 years before that. So I feel like I'm never at such an exquisite level, but I also played. But anyway, that's enough of that. I'm really happy to be here and talk about this. This is this won't be an in-depth research report at all. As Bruce indicated, I've been absorbed for a long time. I've been fascinated for 50 years by Black baseball in the Negro Leagues. Like many others, I found this book, Only the Ball Was White, in 1972, and realized how much I didn't know about baseball. Having grown up in the 50s was a great era for baseball. I grew up as a Red Sox fan, and of course we know their lamentable history with integration. And it came to maturity during the civil rights era, Martin Luther King and so forth. So it's been a natural combination of a fascination, absorption as a player and as a fan and as a coach with baseball, and history of race in America. The course I taught on about a dozen occasions at Middlebury was called Segregation in America, Baseball and Race. And it was essentially a course on the Negro Leagues. So the integration drama is a compelling story. We date baseball's official date for integration is, of course, April 15th, 1947 at Ebbets Field in front of 26,662 fans with Jackie Robinson at first base. Some will call that the reintegration because baseball was integrated, as we know, till the color line was drawn in 1887. So for 60 years, baseball was segregated. For 27 years, from 1920 to 1947, the Negro Leagues existed, and that's been a fascinating chapter in baseball history, and one that has absorbed me as well. I'm going to argue, or not argue, I'm going to point out that there were other dates before April 15th, 1947, that also deserve to be seen as landmark dates and really mark the official integration of organized professional baseball. You need to keep in mind throughout as Negro Leagues historian Don Rogerson, baseball's color line was porous. Below the major league level, before the level of organized baseball, there was integrated baseball in colleges and universities, integrated baseball in towns and cities, and especially in the cities. It's fascinating to read of these the California Winter Leagues, for example, before baseball was integrated. The major league level was an integrated league at a very high level. I've been able to go to Cuba on 2 occasions to see baseball there, and of course, both black players who played in the Negro Leagues. There was always a Cuban team. The New York Cubans, for example, were well known. The white major leaguers and the black major leaguers went down to Cuba and played against one another, and even on some teams with one another, all the time, or in the 30s and 40s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, when baseball was segregated. So I really will talk about the 4 fronts of baseball's integration. Focus on 1946, the year before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier on April 15th, 1947. What's pictured here is kind of an introduction. By the way, I asked Bruce if he would do the slides. I'm so old that if I try to do a talk with accompanying PowerPoint slides, I get lost. I fall behind, and then I try to advance, and then I fall. Then instead of advancing, I reverse. So I'm appreciative that Bruce will. There's only 5 slides with a number of images on each. But here are the 4 fronts. The one on the top left you may recognize. It's the plaque at the commemorating Jackie Robinson's play in Delorimier Stadium in Montreal, which I've seen, and many of you probably have too. It's a nice commemoration. On the top right is and I'm going to talk a little bit about, it's a wonderful place. I hope if any of you go to Florida in the winter months, I hope you'll stop off in Daytona Beach and see Jackie Robinson Ballpark, because it's where when the Dodgers trained in 1946, they trained in Daytona Beach. It was somewhat less, it was more racially tolerant than other Florida cities, and that was borne out. But they played in this park, or a park on this location. This park, though it's been renovated a number of times, it's just a wonderful place. So that's in the top right. And I suspect all of you recognize the park on the bottom left. I can't see everybody, of course. So yeah, that's New Hampshire's Holman Stadium, which has a wonderful, wonderful role to play in baseball's integration. And then I don't imagine a lot of you know the bottom right, but the Dodgers farm team, the ballparks where the 5 black ball players that the Dodgers had in 1946 played. This park here on the lower left is now called Park Quillerama, but it's named after a bowling alley, which I think is unfortunate. But it's in Three Rivers, or when I grew up in Lewiston, Maine, a lot of the people from Lewiston, Maine came from Tree Rivers, as they would say, Trois Rivières. And that was a Class C ball. That was the team where 2 of the Dodger players, Johnny Wright and Roy Partlow, played most of the seasons. And so these 3 ballparks that you see, in addition to the park in Montreal, I've always wanted to visit, and so I have. I mean, but I can't believe that I live so close to Holman Stadium, but I haven't been there. I didn't go there until 3 years ago. And Park Quillerama is a kind of a hike from here. It's about 200 miles, and there's a little story attached to that, which I'll tell you at the end. But the Royals, or Royal, of Trois Rivières played there in the in fact, Three Rivers is a baseball in that town, with the park in that location dates back into the 1800s. Okay, Bruce, next one. Now, I won't spend too long in Montreal because I think it's been very well chronicled, Jackie Robinson's experience in Montreal. I think the best treatment that I know is this wonderful, wonderful landmark book by Jules Tigel, Baseball's Great Experiment. He spends a good deal of time talking about, in very great detail, the background to the signing of Jackie Robinson, and has a number of chapters on Jackie and Montreal. Delormier Stadium was a 20,000-seat sports stadium built in 1928 and demolished in 1968. It was a Dodgers affiliate from 1939 to 1960. Jackie's first game at Delormier was on May 1st, before a full house, including Montreal great who threw out the first ball, Maurice Rocket Richard. Jackie Robinson's regular season debut in 1946 for the Montreal Expos. Everybody know that Jackie Robinson was 28 when he broke the color line for Brooklyn. He was 27 when he played in Montreal. So he didn't have a lot of peak years as a major league ball player. I think we sometimes assume that he was just a young guy coming up into the big leagues. There's a picture on the right of Delormier Stadium. The real debut, if you want to talk about is influence breaking the color barrier. His debut for the Royals was in Jersey City at Roosevelt Stadium, which has been demolished, unfortunately. And many of you know, his performance on that day. He was enormous. He had 4 hits, a homer, 2 steals, 3 RBIs, 4 runs scored, 2 of which were on balks, where he so agitated the pitcher that he balked. And the Dodgers won 14-1. And that year, the Royals won 14-1. And that year was nothing but success for Jackie Robinson. I think it's true that he was very well accepted, even beloved by the Montreal fans. The Royals won the International League by 18.5 games, and Jackie was the toast of the town. So Jackie Robinson in Montreal again has been pretty well chronicled, but it leads to a kind of a discussion at times about why didn't Jackie Robinson just come into the Dodgers team? He's clear he was ready to play. His performance in Montreal was overwhelmingly positive on the field. Branch Rickey felt, and it's part of the legend, the story, the myth, is that Jackie was signed because he had some comfort playing with other white athletes in football and baseball and basketball and track and so forth, but that he could use a year of acclimation, a season of acclimation in Montreal, and that's generally been accepted. But it does lead you to ask sometimes. Rickey's sort of alter ego was Bill Veeck, who later that summer just grabbed Larry Doby from the Newark Eagles and put him on the team. And you wonder if Jackie wasn't ready to play even before 1946, but that's a subject for another discussion. There's Jackie down there with John Wright. As many of you know, John Wright was Jackie's roommate for a while. He also went to spring training with Jackie because Rickey felt that it would be appropriate for Jackie to have a companion. And John Wright has an interesting history in his own. I'll touch on it a little bit as we go along. Okay, Bruce. if I were in a class of adults like this, I'd probably say, anybody been to Jackie Robinson Park in Daytona Beach? I don't imagine too many of you have, and
I'm seeing a couple of them wave their hands up there,
I don't.
Karl.
And isn't it a wonderful spot? I mean, it's just remarkable. A book that I would advise you to, if you love this stuff, a wonderful book, quite comprehensive, which is Chris Lamb's treatment of Jackie Robinson's first spring training in Florida, called Blackout. Uh, um, and that's what sent me to make sure I wanted to see. I go to Florida when the Middlebury baseball team is in Florida. I always say, I need a week or two in Florida to watch baseball. And I get down there, and they're going to California this year, and I'm not going to California. But I was down there to watch some Middlebury baseball and took a side trip from Orlando to Daytona Beach. This is such an unusual ballpark. Can you see it down on the bottom left? That's what it looked like when Jackie Robinson played in it. And it's right on a sort of major street in Daytona Park. There are restaurants and shops on that street just parallel to the park. And then perpendicular to the park is sort of the main drag, the big wide main drag of Daytona Beach. And this was called Island City Park in the 1940s. It's been renamed. It was renamed in 1990, Jackie Robinson Park, and it's on the Registry of Historical Places. Just a beautiful spot. It's also now the home of the Cincinnati Reds single A team, the Tortugas. It's also the home park of Bethune-Cookman University, one of the black universities in the South. And when I was there that day, they were playing a ball game against Alabama State, another black university. So Daytona Beach had a reputation as a relatively tolerant place in the segregated South. That relative tolerance was borne out, but not so other Florida cities. There was trouble in Jacksonville and DeLand, and games were called off there. And in Sanford, where most of the Dodgers minor league, 40 miles from Daytona Beach was Sanford. At 1947, there was a glut of ball players coming back from the war. And so the big club stayed in Daytona Beach, and the minor league club stayed in Sanford. But it was not a place where Jackie could stay. There was an incident the first time he arrived there, and he stayed the whole of that spring training in Daytona Beach. Now, on March 17th, 1946, Jackie stepped to the plate for the Royals again. It's the big club, the Dodgers at City Island Park, and that would be the first time a black ball player had worn the uniform of an organized professional white team in nearly 60 years since the color line was drawn. 4,000 people were at the game. The Jim Crow section was overflowing. Black spectators had paraded from church to the park that day. There were worries that the white fans wouldn't come, but both white and black fans applauded liberally when Jackie Robinson came to the plate, and the black fans especially applauded with gusto. City Island Park was built in 1914. As I mentioned, this is a picture from the 1940s. Renovated many times, it's now this home, as I mentioned, of a minor league team for Cincinnati. So anyway, that I think I might quibble with some and say the first game, the first integrated game was the next year. I might say, well, Jackie was playing for the Montreal Royals, and they had a game scrimmage with the Brooklyn club, the big Brooklyn club. So that was a game which a black man played against a team. Black man played on a team against a white team in organized professional baseball. Okay, Bruce. Now, I won't ask how many people have been to this park. I think I was pretty late getting to Holman Stadium. I went there in the last day. It's now part of the Collegiate Baseball League that the Vermont Expos are in. And I went there for the last day of the season, when I guess it's the Silver Knights, the Nashua Silver Knights of the Futures Collegiate Baseball League were playing, and I don't remember who they were playing. But it's a beautiful ballpark. It has a wonderful commemoration, I think, of Newcomb and Campanella, who were there in 1946 for the whole season. And I think they do it up right. I was there. There were 100 people in the park. I sat next to a fellow who was the dad of the DH for the Silver Knights, and his son was playing, and his son was a theater major at Emerson, who happened to be a terrific ball player, or a fine ball player as well. So Nashua was the site of the first integrated baseball team in the United States. The other two were in Canada. Rickey had signed 2 Negro League stars in the spring of '46, 25-year-old catcher Roy Campanella of the Baltimore Elite Giants. He was 25. He had already played 9 years of professional baseball in the Negro Leagues. And they also signed 19-year-old Don Newcomb, who had played the previous years as a teenager for the Newark Eagles. The Newark Eagles, who were owned by Effa Manley, the only woman in Baseball Hall of Fame. Originally headed to Danville of the 3I League, Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa, Rickey was told they would not be accepted. The Dodgers had 20 farm teams in 1946, so chose to send Campy and Nuke to their brand new affiliate in Nashua, New Hampshire, in the reconstituted New England League. Manchester, Portland, Lynn, Fall River, Lawrence, Pawtucket. As it turns out, Nashua was the ideal landing spot. City of 35,000, which embraced them unequivocally. Both men expressed their enjoyment of Nashua. Nashua treated us like royalty. I thank God for Nashua, said Newcomb. Campy was so popular he could have been elected mayor, according to their general manager, a guy named Emil Buzzy Bavasi. We know the players that Campanella and Newcomb became. Campy has 3 National League MVPs, 9 All-Star games, elected to the Hall of Fame in 1969. Newcomb was Rookie of the Year in 1949 for the Dodgers. And in 1956, he was both the MVP and the Cy Young winner. First black pitcher to win a World Series game and first black pitcher to win 20 games. Newcomb was scouted by none other than Clyde Sukeforth, who played for the Nashua Millionaires in 1926. And as most of you know, because this is the name of your chapter, Sukeforth was Rickey's right-hand man. He actually was the manager on the day that Jackie Robinson broke the color line for the Dodgers in '47, and he was the manager the next day. And then they went, he didn't want to manage the team. He liked his role as a coach and as a scout and as Rickey's Man Friday. Rickey hired Bert Schotten to manage the team. And he was just the right manager for that team, and the Dodgers team in 1947 it had such a historic run. So I mentioned Bavasi. He for 3 decades he was an important figure for the Dodgers. He was a 20-year-old general manager, just coming out of the war. He was an infantryman in World War II. The other fellow who is important to that team, I can't see him in the picture at the top, but of course was Walter Alston. Walter Alston was not much of a major league player. In fact, he only had 1 at-bat in the major leagues, in the American League. But as was borne out over the years, he was a calm and firm presence. He was called the Quiet Man, managed the Dodgers from 1954 to '76. He won 9 pennants and 5 World Series, elected to the Hall of Fame in 1983. The Nashua Dodgers were champions of the New England League that summer. They were edged out in the regular season by Lynn, were dominant in the playoffs, beating first Lynn and then Manchester. Finished the year 80-41. Here's a quick anecdote that many of you perhaps are aware of, but a few weeks into the season, seeing Campanella's maturity and leadership, Alston told the team that should he be thrown out of a game, Campy would be the acting manager. 5 days later, he was thrown out of a game. Campy is the first black manager and therefore in organized baseball. Some of you may be familiar. This is a really nice little book. It's called Dem Little Bums, the Nashua Dodgers. I suspect some of you know about it, by Steve Daly, the newspaper man. So I feel like Northern New Englanders, have a real relationship to this historic baseball time. So pleases me. Even though I remain and I live in Vermont, and I've often said the hardest thing I have to do is drive through New Hampshire, live, freeze, and die, as they say. Okay. Next slide, please. All right. This is my trip to Stade Quillerama. Where to start? It's a dumb name for a ballpark. In July, 2 years ago, I found a pal and I said, let's go up and see this place where there are two black Dodgers, two of the 5 black players in organized baseball in 1946 played. You can see the team picture on the top left. You can see John Wright is in the first row on the left, and Roy Partlow at the last seat on the right. It was in 1946. It was a Dodgers farm team, and its name was Stade Municipal, or Stade Fernand Bedard, who was a baseball figure of some import in Three Rivers. And from 1971 to 1976, the Cincinnati Reds AA team played there, and Ken Griffey got his start at in Three Rivers. Raleigh Eastwick, a number of those players from those teams in the 70s that played such great World Series matches with the Red Sox. In January 46, John Wright, who spent the summer, John Wright did not pitch well in spring training in Daytona Beach. He did not pitch often. He did not pitch well, but he was a legitimate ball player, legitimate prospect. He was 27, like Jackie Robinson. He had gone 26-4 for the Homestead Grays in 1943. He pitched in an East-West All-Star game before 51,000 fans in Chicago. He's described as a string bean fireballer with control and wicked curve. He spent his summer here in Three Rivers. Hadn't pitched well for Montreal, and there's speculation with a number of other early black pitchers that the pressure was even more intense for a pitcher trying to break into the white major leagues, because you had the ball, and there was a great fear among others that they would hit a batter and spark an incident. So Wright ended up in pitching for the whole season for the Royals of Three Rivers. The Dodgers also signed early in the spring pitcher Roy Partlow of the Philadelphia Stars of the Negro Leagues, believing that Jackie needed another teammate in Montreal when Wright was sent down. Partlow was a veteran, reported to be 30 years old, but he was actually in his mid-30s. He was a good pitcher in the Negro Leagues for the powerhouse Homestead Grays, pitched in some East-West All-Star games. For Montreal, Partlow pitched well at times and not well at others. He had a 5.5 point ERA. After 2 months, Jackie had proven that he was fine on his own in Montreal, So Partlow was dispatched to Three Rivers. I can say that, Trois-Rivières, but we'll call it Three Rivers for now. I grew up in Lewiston, Maine, and
Sounds French.
when I came
Sorry,
to
Karl, it
Middlebury,
sounds French. Like does someone have the French pronunciation of these terms? Like,
well, I can't do it in French, but I can do it in French accent from having grown up in Lewiston. My best friend in college for a while was a guy from Manchester. He was from Manchester, New Hampshire. So no, Three Rivers is my other friends in Lewiston had family in Three Rivers. I was always glad to see Trois-Rivières. Anyway, Wright had pitched okay at Three Rivers, was 77-6. Wright, again, had pitched okay at Three Rivers, was 7-6 when Partlow arrived. But revived by Partlow's presence, he won 5 in a row and finished 12-8. Partlow, on the other hand, was brilliant, unhittable. He finished the season 10-1, and he also batted .400 playing the outfield when he was not pitching. The Royals finished the year 72-49. They overtook the Pittsfield Electrics for the regular season title and defeated first the Rome, New York Colonels and then Pittsfield for the Can-Am Championship. That's the Canadian American League, which included Pittsfield, Rome, New York, Amsterdam, New York, Oneonta, New York, Amsterdam, New York, Gloversville, Johnstown, New York, Schenectady, and Quebec. Three Rivers had also had a brilliant manager. Some of you who like baseball lore and history, they had a Californian Frenchie Bourgaderay, was a colorful ball player. It's interesting, he was not French, he was from Spain, but in the Basque region just on the border of France. He and his 6 brothers were all nicknamed Frenchie. Frenchie Bourgaderay had 12 years in the majors. He batted .283, a lifetime batting average. And in 1946, with the Royals of Three Rivers, he batted .375 and was the league MVP. So they had quite a club in Three Rivers. Now, my experience there was really fun. You can see the park down at the in the bottom middle. There, my friend and I, Rick and I, got there right about game time, and we drove in, and it's in a big open area. It has a number of other large buildings there and a huge parking lot, and there were no cars in the parking lot. So this group of young men was standing in front of the park, and we went up and asked them. We said, "It's 1 o'clock. The game is supposed to start." And this was 2 years ago, not last summer, the summer before. So this is one of the questions I would ask if I could address you sort of in a group in a room. There was no game that day, though not a drop of rain had fallen. Why was there no game? I can't see hands. Bruce, maybe you can. Or...
If you know the answer to that question, go down to the bottom and hit react and then hit raise your hand. We'll get you in.
That's just a little bit of recent history. We drove 4 hours expecting to see this game against the, check my notes, against.
Molly has a answer to the question. Go ahead, Molly.
Was it canceled due to COVID?
Nope, that was after COVID.
Okay, so it was after COVID.
This was in 2023. It affected all of us in this region. Smoke, forest fire.
Oh, yeah.
The air quality was such so. We drove for almost 10 hours that day. Didn't get to go to a park, get to see a game at the park. But we were there at 1 o'clock, and it wasn't terribly, the air quality didn't seem very bad. So Rick and we went down and Three Rivers is a pretty big spot. I don't have in my notes the population, but it may have, 80 to 100,000 people. I should look that up before I say something like that. But it has a big downtown. It's right on the water, and we had a very nice time. We had a lunch, and we drove home. But anyway, I was glad to see the park where 2 of the 5 black ball players from the 1946 Dodger organization had played their games. So just to conclude this short presentation, I would say in 1946, the year before baseball's official integration with Jackie Robinson, there were 3 interracial teams in organized baseball. They were all Dodger farm teams. All 3 won their league championships. So when Branch Rickey stated that black men were the greatest untapped reservoir of baseball talented, and when he argued that the main purpose in signing them was, I want to win, it looks like he knew right away what he was talking about. All 3 won their league championships. So that's what I got. Thanks for listening. And I hope you'll, oh yeah, there we are. We have Jackie, the wonderful Jackie Robinson. And keep in mind those other 4 players that also broke the color barrier. They had interesting biographies too. Johnny Wright continued to pitch and pitched pretty well. The Negro Leagues were declining very fast. The Negro National League went out of business in 1948. The Negro American League limped on through the 50s, but most often with only a couple of teams later in the 50s, and almost always barnstorming. The Kansas City Monarchs in the 1950s were sort of the equivalent of the Harlem Globetrotters. They played very few, if any, of their ball games in Kansas City, but they were a team that people wanted to see as they traveled from place to place. Thank you.
If you have a question or comment for our presenter, Dr. Karl Lindholm, tonight, go down to the bottom of the screen and hit the button marked React. Once you hit that, you'll see a button marked Raise Hand. Hit that button and we will get you in to ask questions or make comments on this presentation this evening. I already see some hands going up. Let's get started. Paul Allen, how you doing? Unmute and get in on the action here, my friend. How you been?
I'm doing exceptionally well.
That is great to hear.
It's nice that you just keep getting all these great speakers. Karl, I enjoyed the hell out of that. It's Trois Rivières. And I, on behalf of the London Majors and Labatt Memorial Park, I would like to have you visit London, Ontario, and see the oldest continuously played baseball diamond in the world, Labatt Park.
Oh, I would
So,
like to.
as I said, on behalf of those guys, love to have you see that if you haven't already done it.
No, I haven't. No, Canada has a fabulous baseball tradition and history.
Mhm.
And again, my interest in the Negro Leagues, when you check, and these Negro League players were nomads. I mean, they played wherever they could make a dollar, and there's a really long tradition of black baseball in Canada, or black baseball players playing in Canada. And we just the Veterans Committee just elected Dave Parker and
Dick Allen.
to the Hall of Fame. They had a chance to and it was a broadly composed committee. I have no problem with the committee, but they had a chance to recognize, of course, Louis Tiant, and they didn't. But also a couple of black players, one of which John Donaldson is his name, was a great player, is not in the Hall of Fame, hasn't passed muster in the other evaluations of Negro League talent because he didn't play much in the Negro Leagues, so they don't have statistics of that value. But he played a lot in Canada. He played throughout Canada, and that was true when you sit down and look at some of the histories of these black ball players. Canada was a real destination.
Paul wrote the book on that, and he presented to our chapter a while back. Paul, remind us the name of that book.
Bright Lights, Black Stars, and it covers a lot of Canadian baseball history. And at one time, Karl and other people, I'm sure if you got my talk, there were more black players from the Negro Leagues playing in Canada in several leagues than there were in the Negro Leagues, because the Negro League were declining. But it's called Bright Lights, Black Stars, and it's certainly complimentary what Karl is telling us.
Good.
Ben Abel, you're up. Ben, how you doing?
Good. I was just looking back through my archives of Saber stuff, and I remember Paul. And there was someone else who did a presentation on Canadian baseball history. I think it was through your chapter, Bruce. And there's a guy here. Here are a couple of things. So, what did Paul present on? And then there's a guy, Will, that's always at these chapter meetings, who told me his dad was Canadian. But we had another presentation on Canadian baseball history.
I believe Steve Rennie did that a while back.
Yeah.
In my Saber folder, where I'd saved a whole bunch of like information from these different meetings of years, or put them in my email list, right? I seem to recall we talked about 19th century Canadian baseball history.
I believe that was Steve Rennie. Steve Rennie presented him on Canadian baseball a while back to us. Steve is the chair of the Shaughnessy chapter up there in Ottawa. Does a great job.
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
Yep. Paul's book was presented to us earlier this year, I believe. There's so many. You can see any of those meetings on our YouTube channel. They're all out there. Ken Edwards. Ken, you're up, man. How you doing?
Hold on, Ken. I'm gonna come right back to you, Ken. Hold on. I'll be right back.
Oh.
No, I'm not going on. Oh, I can't find it. Oh, darn! It's always been.
And we thought our lending library was big.
I found it. I'm going to embarrass Ken Edwards.
Goodness me.
That's a picture of a Babe Ruth team. And Ken Edwards is right in the middle, standing up there. He was my assistant baseball coach in 1980 something early. When did you graduate? When did you graduate from Middlebury, Ken? What year?
1983. 83.
Oh, this was 83. He was my assistant coach for the Middlebury Babe Ruth program. So nice.
Those were great days.
Nice to see you, Ken. Sorry for the personal thing.
They were great days. So I have more of maybe a comment / question. Karl, I just finished reading Our Team by Luke Eplin about the 1948 Cleveland Indians, and the focus is on Doby and Veck and Feller and Page. And one of the comments that was taken from Veck was that he believed that Branch Rickey had a much more intelligent change strategy than he did. You mentioned earlier tonight that he put Doby right into the major leagues in July of 1947. And Doby struggled that year. He wasn't played very much by Lou Boudreau. But what you've nicely done tonight is outline the change management strategy that Branch Rickey used, using the Canadian ball clubs and the Nashua Ball Club. And you can see how that strategy yielded so much success from those players like Newcomb and Campanella and Robinson, et cetera. And I don't know whether you have a comment about change strategies or change management strategies as it relates to this topic, and what was more effective and what was less effective.
Well, but as I taught at the Negro Leagues course at Middlebury, the wonderful contrasts. Rickey was called the Mahatma. He was a strict Methodist. He didn't go to ball games on Sunday, and though he didn't mind the team played. And Rickey was pompous, and he was a lawyer by training, and he had gone through these not agonized, but these very profound steps to make sure he got the right player and put them in the right situation. And Veck being Veck, he just says, these guys can play. Now, it's true, Doby struggled in 47, but he was good in 48. And he brought in Satchel Paige, who was put in his first 4 starts, because they were in Cleveland and Chicago, put 400 people in the seats of Comiskey Park and Municipal Stadium. Satchel Paige was pretty good in August of 48. And so he knew these guys could play right away. So it's what it is just two very interesting competing strategies. That's really fun to teach. And my question is, I had a question. Some of you may have read books by Lee Lowenfish, who wrote the Branch Rickey tome, 1,000 pages. And I said, okay, Robinson was 28 when he broke the color line in 47. He was 27 when you sent him to Montreal. Clearly he could play, but okay, he's the first. But why did Campanella why couldn't have Campanella been a figure like Johnny Wright or Roy Partlow? Why was Campanella held back? He was young; he could be held back, but he could have joined Robinson in 47. And Lee Lowenfish told me that I should look at the baseball reference, and he said the Dodgers had a catcher they liked. He turned out not to be a great catcher. Campanella replaced him the next year, halfway through the season, but a guy named Bruce Edwards. So I've always had a few reservations about how deliberate Rickey was, for which he is celebrated and probably properly. And then there's this wonderful example of Beck, who just says, "Hey, you can really play. Let's do it at the major league level." Just it's a nice contrast. But anyway, thanks.
Great. Thanks. We'll see you next week.
Exactly. Thank you.
Ben Abel, you're back. Go get him.
Yeah, I just turned my virtual background on a couple of books. This one I found discarded in the library a couple of years ago in a book sale. It's by Sharon Robinson. It's called Jackie's 9, Jackie Robinson's Values to Live By. Interesting read. I haven't had a chance to read it all, but I thought it was interesting. This one is called, I know it doesn't have the cover. This is 42 Fate. So those two books I found in my library that were going to be, or they're sold off in a book sale for $2 Canadian per book.
Let's go to Alan Cohen is here this evening. Let's go to Alan. How are you, Alan?
Hello, everybody. I
to see
see
you.
Wes Turbo is here. Wes and I, and a couple other people, have been looking at a few Negro League games over the past few years, including most recently 1945. I'd like to talk to the subject of Doby going right up to Cleveland in 1947. Robinson was only in the Negro Leagues for that 1 year, 1945. He had been in the military before then. So he did not have as much playing experience in the Negro Leagues, although he did quite well. Whereas Doby did have more experience playing in Newark. And maybe that's the reason why he went to the majors right away. And as far as Rickey is concerned, there was significantly more pressure on Rickey, and I might say the other owners in New York, to integrate their teams. The black newspapers were full of information on that. New York had passed an integration law, so Rickey had other reasons to sign players. As for the three he signed, Jackie Robinson led the Negro American League in batting average in 1945. Roy Campanella led the Negro National League in batting average in 1945. And Newcomb was just off the charts in what he was doing, although very young, for the Newark Eagles that year. I think he won close to 10 games. And their schedule is nowhere as large as, say, a major league schedule was at the time. So I think one of the reasons why Doby went right up and the Dodger guys were held back a bit was they didn't all have that great experience. The Dodgers had like 4 or 5 catchers at the time who were trying for 1 or 2 major league slots. Bobby Bragan was also one of their catchers. So Campanella started with Brooklyn in 1948, but was not doing that well, wasn't playing that much, went to St. Paul, knocked it off the charts at St. Paul for about a month, and then he came back and had the great season with the Dodgers. I think had he been up earlier in 1948, the string of black rookies of the year in the National League would have extended from 1947 through, I think it is 1953.
Hmm.
48 was the only year in which a black player did not win Rookie of the Year in the National League in that stretch. And I will be quiet and let the next guy ask a question.
Now, I just respond quickly. Those are good points. It could be argued, however, that the environment in New York was more amenable to having black players because of the same pressures that you cited. There were indeed anti-discrimination laws. LaGuardia, the major, was all for baseball's integration. Rickey, for many, many years was the president of the St. Louis Cardinals, and that would have been unthinkable for him to make these steps too. So no, you're right. These were there were, and the black press, you cannot give enough credit for maintaining the pressure on Major League Baseball. The other major thing that happened that allowed Rickey and then later others to integrate was that Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis died. And Happy Chandler came in to be the commissioner, and he was a senator from Kentucky. And they said, "What do you think about baseball's integration?" This is famous stuff. He says, "Well, if they can fight and die in Iwo Jima, they ought to be able to play baseball in America." World War II, interestingly, World War I, black folks made the same arguments, and in the history of the greatest period of violence from the Ku Klux Klan was post World War I. Just the reverse happened World War II. World War II was a necessary necessary to the advancement. But anyway, that's all very this again. I go back to the Bible, Baseball's Great Experiment by Jules Tigel. Wonderfully extended treatment of all, especially the stuff going into Rickey's deliberations in order to make this happen. The black press cannot be given too much credit. Alan, I want to get back to say one of my favorite players is a black Canadian player, Ferguson Jenkins. He's a wonderful player. So
yeah, Fergie, he's fantastic. He's still out there on social media interacting with fans. He looks great. Matthew Glidden, you are up. How you doing, Matt?
Going well. Hear me okay?
Perfect.
Great. Karl, I was chuffed to see your name as a guest this evening, as I've already benefited from the work you did for William Clarence Matthews. I'm lucky enough to be not that far from where he's buried, here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and also where he played. So you've done a lot of legwork in describing the life and the pre-Jackie Robinsons, really, with him in mind first. Who are some other names in between the 1900 and then his debut in 46 who you'd call out to us who you feel like deserve more treatment and maybe there just hasn't been time enough to address their stories?
wow. Well, William Clarence Matthews, I worked on for years and years and years. I will die with one regret, which is that I never finished the biography I did of him. I have 80,000 words, and there it sits. Anyway, you're probably familiar with the Jerry Malloy Negro Leagues Conference and committee.
Yeah.
I mean, the work that's been done by that group. I mean, we now have 38 Negro Leaguers in the Hall of Fame, no, not two more, but 38 Negro Leaguers, men who played in the Negro Leagues or were owners. And there's still agitation for more. John Donaldson, and I think it was Willie Harris. There's a fellow named, oh shoot, I'm not good at names anymore, but he goes to all of these conferences and he thinks Rap Dixon should be in the Hall of Fame and so forth. I haven't done a lot of that kind of research.
That's Ted Knorr.
Ted Knorr, exactly. He's a fanatic and he's a wonderful guy. I don't have a particular champion, a player I would champion, but there's there are two books that I tell people to get. I'm in my library, don't worry. I'm coming back.
This is an embarrassment of riches, as Matthew put it in the chat a few minutes ago. For a presentation, wow, the level of knowledge in this room tonight is amazing.
Somebody expresses some interest in the Negro Leagues and they don't know much. I always have 4 or 5 of this book, but I've given them to give away because it's now on Remainder for about $20, and it has a beautiful cover. It's called "We Are the Ship," and that's from a quotation by Rube Foster, who started the Negro Leagues. We are the ship, all else is the sea. We Are the Ship is a story of Negro League baseball by this artist named Kadir Nelson, and he's a fabulous artist. In fact, if you recall the New Yorker cover on George Floyd that was so dramatic and well known, these pictures. So it's supposedly for young adults, but his artwork is so striking that, and it's a very good early biography for people of any age, enhanced by these wonderful illustrations. The other book I give to people who want to know something about it, because they don't want to read 300 pages, is Joe Posnanski's book with Buck O'Neill. He spends a year with Buck O'Neill, and he gives you it's a narrative of that year, but he also gives you at the same time a history of the Negro Leagues. I can't believe I can't find it. It's because I'm looking for it. But it's a year. Shoot, I can't. Where is it? But Joe Posnanski is a person who has written the 100 best baseball players, and he's I think the best baseball journalist, and he writes books. But and Buck O'Neill was a classic figure, as many of you know. But he writes a book in search of, anyway. It's a book where he just spends a year with Buck O'Neill, and along the way, there he tells the history of the Negro Leagues from Buck, and Buck is presenting it. And again, if I were a couple years younger, I'd just spit it right out. But it's not there right now.
That's okay. Let's go to Molly. Molly, you're up.
Karl, I want to thank you to take the time tonight to present to us. It was a beautiful presentation and I learned so much.
Thank you.
And if I can say something to Mr. Cohen, I wanted to wish you a happy Hanukkah, because I don't know if I'll see you before Hanukkah, and please send Deb my love.
He's on mute, but I can see him smiling.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Molly grew up with Alan's daughter, Deb. And go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I just posted a picture on Facebook of my granddaughter.
Which one?
Mariessa.
Oh my gosh.
She's Deb's daughter. They had a Christmas party at a ballpark in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and it was done very nicely. We cannot do that at a ballpark in Hartford. It's too
That's for sure
cold outside. And
that picture that you put up of that young woman in the dark colored dress, that was Mariessa?
Yes.
Holy moly. Nobody, we're talking shop here. I'm gonna have to show that to Molly later, but I remember Mariessa is like this high.
She's still short.
Well,
okay.
But she's an adult now. Holy cow. Oh, we're getting off the rails here. Andre Lacosta, if you can turn your camera on, be my guest. Otherwise, save me here, buddy.
Okay, well, just to distract for a little bit. So when you talked about the, Karl, when you talked about the stadium in Trois-Rivières, the stadium was built in 1938, and it's built with the same blueprint as the stadium in Quebec City, Stade Canac, which was opened a year later, 39. I would really recommend, if you're in in Quebec, go see that stadium as well in Quebec City, because it's taken care of a lot. Well, it's renovated a lot more recently and taken care of a bit better than the one in Trois-Rivières. And also there's some wonderful murals in the hallways in that stadium, and it's really a treat to go see. And it's one of those great old ballparks that are built in the 30s. It's got that real charm to it.
Thank you. One of the things I didn't mention when I was talking about Trois-Rivières was we didn't see a ball game, but they have a small museum there and a shop. It's really, really beautiful. Is it easy to put the slide back up for Trois-Rivières, Bruce? Is that easy to do?
Second. They put me on the spot.
That's what I meant to do, because I couldn't do it in 100 years. I looked up the book by Joe Posnanski, which is a great place to start. It's called The Soul of Baseball, a road trip through Buck O'Neill's America. Very readable. It's a narrative. You'll love Buck O'Neill, and along the way, you'll learn the history of the Negro Leagues.
There you go.
Next one.
That's Holden Stadium.
Next one.
Next one. There we go.
Yes, down in the lower right. There's this wonderful young woman in the gift shop museum named I think Marie, and I was able to purchase a marvelous history of baseball in Trois-Rivières, and so we spent an hour just looking through all of the material in that. So anyway, I wanted to mention, I didn't say anything about it. I neglected to. It's worth the trip almost just to see we're going back. I'm going back.
I want to get in before Ken. I'm going to delay you for just a second. I apologize, because down the bottom of the screen I see right now, Dick Layden is here. I haven't seen Dick now in much too long. And first off, how you doing, my friend?
I'm up and at it. I have a great physical therapist who says I'm going to be walking a couple of miles, just a little bit. So
well, you look great. So go get him here tonight. Good to see you.
I just want to make one point about Larry Doby. In 1967, I worked for Larry Doby at a summer youth camp at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst.
Wow.
And in the course of listening to him for that summer, it became apparent to me that he felt that he was underappreciated, that Jackie Robinson had gotten all the publicity because that's where the story was, but that his accomplishment in the American League should have been given more attention, and it wasn't. And he was a little bitter about it. I wouldn't say the same bitterness that like Hank Aaron had expressed in some of his talkings about what the press did, but and looking at the record, I have to agree with him. I mean, I think more attention should be. Well, maybe it's because he played in Cleveland. Might have something to do with it. Rickey's a better story than Vec, I guess. But it's there. The bitterness was there in 1967, and I did a show with him, a card show in Cleveland about 8 or 10 years later. And I remind him of the fact that he once employed me as a 20-year-old. And he still was a little bitter, even at the card signing days. So just as he's out there. I hope we pay some attention to him.
Thank you, Dick. It is ever thus. Someone who comes in second, who is the vice president? 20 years ago. I mean, the person who comes in second always, I think, has a problem of that sort. It's America, but the people I feel are neglected, of course, are, well, Joe Posnanski says the third best player and I think he's an authority. It's one opinion, but I think he's close to the truth. Third best player ever to play baseball is a guy named Oscar Charleston. How many people have heard of Oscar Charleston? He was the Black Willie Mays. I mean, he was a Willie Mays before Willie Mays, and he played forever. And man, Oscar Charleston was every bit the equal of Aaron and Doby. And so no, I think you're right about Larry Doby. He has the misfortune of being second. Vec was often a more colorful figure certainly than Rickey. But no, I think that we need to learn more about one of my problems with, and this relates to this talk, is the attention is so exclusively focused on April 15th every year when we have Jackie Robinson Day and everybody plays 42. It's too exclusive. We should be, and Major League Baseball last year did a pretty good job with a number of different events, but we should be focusing on the other figures who are truly obscure and were allowed for the greatness of the Negro Leagues and black players. And so that's my hobby horse.
That's very true. Let's go to Ken Edwards. Ken, thank you for that indulgence, my friend.
Yeah, just a quick comment on Dick's point. That bitterness comes through in the epilogue of our team in a big way. Doby shows his bitterness during that epilogue. So you're spot on. And I simply wanted to add one more thing. The picture that Karl showed is wonderful. It was my first coaching experience, and we had a wonderful team, a wonderful time, and Karl is a great teacher of young people. And so that I just wanted to end my comment on that. Thank you, Karl.
Okay,
All right,
we're having lunch next week, and it looks like now I have to pay.
I was about to say that you're up to pay. Last one for tonight is Ben Abel. Ben, go get him.
More of a comment. I saw Andre speaking. I should hang my head in shame. I'm a Canadian. I've never been to the province of Quebec. Obviously, when I see some of the stuff about Jackie's time in Montreal, never been to Montreal. So some interesting things to add when I make it to that Canadian city, because I should go there for a number of reasons.
And this has been one incredible talk. The level of knowledge in this room tonight is extraordinary. Karl, I can't thank you enough for doing this. This has been fantastic.
I'll come back next week.
Please do. Yeah, hey, we'll have you in again. You've got more in the holster, I know. So we'll get you on again, that's for sure. But next week, Monday, December 16th at 7 p.m. Eastern, we will have author and SABR member Bill Reisig with us to discuss his new book, Baseball's Wildest Season: 3 Leagues, 34 Teams, and the Chaos of 1884. The link is in the meeting booklet sent out with the Monday message and also on the SABR events calendar at sabr.org/events. So sign up today. And finally, if you're a baseball fan watching on YouTube and you like what you see, please like this video and subscribe to our channel to be alerted to each of our weekly uploads. And if you're not yet a member, you need to join the Society for American Baseball Research, the premier baseball community. Offering an amazing baseball buffet of options to explore your fandom, SABR boasts more than 35 different research communities, over 80 regional chapters, and innumerable opportunities to connect with baseball minds across the world. For more information, go to sabr.org/join today. Karl Lindholm, you're incredible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Negro Leagues Conference, the Jerry Malloy Negro Leagues Conference in Louisville, the first week in August. So love to see some of you there.
That is also available in the events calendar. Have a look at that because that is an exceptional conference. Let's get everybody out of here. We'll have a good night. We'll see you next week, everyone.
Nice.